इस सदी को भारत की सदी बनाने के लिए बहुत जरूरी है कि भारत के युवा पढ़ाई के साथ ही स्किल में भी उतने ही दक्ष हों।
Good evening. They sold us a shining headline. The skill capital of the world. It was supposed to be the engine of New India. Under the country's flagship skilling program, the Pradhan Mantri Kaushal Vikas Yojana, PMKVY, a massive 14,450 crore war chest designed to turn our youth into an industrial army. The government claimed victory early. They touted 1.1 crore certifications. They showed us the glossy brochures. Training was heavily concentrated in a narrow set of low to mid-skill roles such as retail sales associates, tailors, sewing machine operators, domestic data entry operators, and general duty assistants. Over 40% of short-term training certifications were concentrated in just 10 job roles, such as retail, tailoring, data entry, to name a few. Even though more than 700 job roles were approved on paper, but the Comptroller and Auditor General of India, CAG, has just pulled the plug on the hype machine. The audit reveals a system rotting from the inside. We were promised high-tech careers, we got domestic data entry. We were promised direct benefits, we got ghost beneficiaries, and thousands of people sharing the same bank account. The narrative has collapsed from demographic dividend to demographic disaster. The certificates are real, the jobs are imaginary. So I would of course like to take this moment and welcome you to the Great Skill Heist. And joining me is our tech journalist Smruthi Nadig. Let's of course get into the truth on front page. Smruthi, a big welcome to you, and it's a pleasure to have you with us. Of course, Smruthi has been covering this story extensively. Always a pleasure to have you with us, Smruthi. Not a lot of pleasure for all the people I just mentioned, the students and the entire ecosystem. But how are you doing?
I'm good. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Wonderful. So let's get into it. So for the first up, let me just establish this and then I'll get into the questions, Smruthi. First up, the why. The money was there, the intent was there, but we ended up with low value training like domestic data entry instead of industrial skills. So the first question, Smruthi, is what exactly happened? I mean,
Right.
What is the scam?
Right. So under this flagship skilling program, the Pradhan Mantri Kaushal Vikas Yojana, they provided an outlay of 14,450 crore between 2015 to 2022. Of the 14,500 crore budgeted, only 10,000, about 200 crore was released, and only 9,261 crore was utilized, which is again a stark difference
Yeah.
there itself.
Yeah.
The CAG found that candidates were enrolled without proper verification of age, educational qualifications, eligibility criteria prescribed under the guidelines. So, using Kerala as one of the key examples, the CAG audit exposed serious conversions and placement failures under this scheme. The scheme links
What about the
20%.
bank accounts?
Right.
52,000 students, 12,000 accounts. What if you could shed light on that?
Right. So the scheme links 20% of the payment to training providers or partners, including private training centers. When they didn't employ all of these people, the money successfully went to these training partners. The same happened when the survey verification was going on. About 56,000 of the candidates had 12,000 accounts only. Most of the phone numbers were given, they were either null, 111,000. There is no way that you could verify this, that they actually took part in this placement. In many states also, the same candidates were in different batches. The placements were given wrong. So verification, the ID control was very much lacking.
How did the policy incentives fail so badly and horribly that training partners prioritized volume and easy certificates over actual employable skills?
Policy incentives failed because funding tranches and performance metrics rewarded scale, speed, and reported placements rather than verified learning outcomes or any sustained employment. With weak audits, poor IT controls, and minimal on ground validation, training partners were incentivized to merely maximize numbers through low effort courses and paper compliance. Over 40% of short term training certifications were concentrated in just 10 job roles, even though more than 700 job roles were approved on paper. While 1.1 crore candidates were certified in total, only 56.14 lakh received short term training or training under special projects, and about 41% only secured placements. This sharp gap between certification and employment has raised serious concerns about whether the scheme meaningfully enhanced unemployment or merely expanded paperwork driven outcomes. The audit also highlighted the absence of long term national skill development plan. The scheme was implemented in short phases with changing guidelines, which resulted in inconsistent execution and very limited continuity.
Before I move on, Smruthi, I have to ask you this. When you
Right.
wrote this, and of course, when you did your research, which is, of course, a very extensive amount of research, I'm sure, which you would have done, you would have spoken to a lot of the government agencies, the experts, etc. Did you fume? How angry were you?
Absolutely. When unemployment is on the rise in this country, and most of my friends, youth in this country, are unemployed still after receiving master's graduation, PhDs, it's absolutely ridiculous that this is happening. There's such lack of job roles in the society, and we're not even taking the youth into account. There's no empathy for the youth in this country.
Yeah, I think that's it. You've hit the nail on the head. The abysmal lack of empathy. Of course, let's get into the next aspect, Smruthi. Let's actually talk about the ghosts. Yes, 52,000 students sharing just 12,000 bank accounts. Fabulous. Some account numbers listed simply as 11111. In Kerala, we saw photoshopped offer letters. So the question now is, this looks less like negligence and more like an organized syndicate. Does the audit suggest that these were just administrative errors, or was this a coordinated effort to just siphon off public funds? How big was the cover up?
Right. I'll give you an example. So, for one company in Kerala, while the training partner claimed 14 placements, the firm employed only five. In the other two cases, the companies haven't employed any of the 35 placements claimed by the training partner. Like you mentioned, appointment letters, salary slips, seals submitted by these training partners were found to be fabricated. This led to the recovery of 22.33 lakh rupees and blacklisting of agencies in Kerala.
Wow.
So, see, the audit does not label the failures as fraud or coordinated siphoning in legal terms. However, it what it does establish is a pattern of systemic, repeated, and large-scale irregularities, fake placements, mass duplicate bank accounts, placeholder entries, fabricated documents that cannot be explained as isolated administrative lapses. The CAG's language is careful and institutional. It frames these breakdowns in controls, verification, and
Sure.
accountability, enabled by incentive structures that rewarded volume and self reported outcomes. Basically, the audit suggests structural and governance failures created conditions where misuse was easy, low risk, and lucrative, but it leaves the determination of intent or criminal coordination to investigative and enforcement agencies.
Tell me this, Smriti, with of course now the audit revealing this kind of malaise, I want to understand what probably is going to be the action which is going to be taken before, of course, we move on and start maybe discussing something a little brighter, hopefully a probable solution, etc. What kind of action do you feel will be taken post this audit?
I mean, we're far away from any actions being taken place right now because the scale at which this information has been given to the people is very low. Also, despite all of these irregularities, there are more skill development schemes that are coming up, especially for women-led founders or
Oh, wow.
AI skilling that is going to happen. So I think this is just going to get brushed under the carpet very soon.
Oh, really? You think so? I
Yeah,
mean, that's a
absolutely.
huge claim. What did the experts say, Smriti? You have spoken to a few. What did they have to say on this?
So a political analyst, Harish Ramaswamy, told us that this financial probability is a cornerstone of democratic governance. Without it, public programs invite suspicion. But there's been such lack of effective guidance on how young people should transition from these education to skills and then to employment is very low. He also blamed bureaucratic complexities and excessive procedural barriers that hinder any meaningful action, which in turn just erodes trust in these government schemes. And there have been other education heads that have said, unless you have a clear vision of why you are introducing a skilling program, who you target, what happens after the training, the gap is bound to happen. We we have failed to talk about these things before the scheme was introduced.
Smriti, tell me this. I mean, there is a huge thrust as far as AI now, as you had mentioned a little while back, AI now becoming a very important skill. Companies, conglomerates, corporates, everyone, I mean, is almost, it's like a demand now that you need to be skilled in AI. With these kind of things breaking out, does it not at so many levels make just derail that entire situation? Won't it increase the gap? As far as the people who are required from having that skill, joining jobs, that gap gets bigger. One, two, does it also not bring in a certain sense of cynicism into the
Right.
entire system with a news like this, with an audit like this, with revelations like this?
Absolutely. I mean, one of the things that we need to also consider is that privileged people will somehow find jobs. You have connections, you have other skills, and you have
Yeah,
master's degrees from different, esteemed institutions. But what is the problem here is that the tier three, tier four students, the
yes.
youth from that sector are going to be neglected very heavily because we're not catering to any of these things to them. The skilling has to happen for the youth of this country, but we don't really see much happening for people who actually need it.
Unfortunate. So at the end of the day, the
Yeah,
students were not at fault here, but they
absolutely.
essentially, the organizers, the beneficiaries in terms of, let's say you mentioned the Kerala Institute, you talked about other
Mhm.
placement agencies, etc. Those would be probably the people under the scanner. Am I right? Am I wrong in understanding this?
Yeah, definitely. When they found out during the survey that these TPs had fabricated salary slips or appointment letters, it led to a recovery of 22.33 lakh, and it
Wow.
blacklisted agencies in Kerala. And this is only one case study.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. You, of course, mentioned the solution a while back, Smriti, which brings me to this particular question, which is, given the scale of this fraud, is the
Yeah.
fix just, let's say, stricter audits for these partners moving forward? Because you mentioned there are other schemes also right now which are primed and ready. Or do we need to scrap the entire policy altogether and focus on
Right.
formal education first?
So stricter audits alone are insufficient because these schemes are also point to major design failures. During an interview, like I mentioned, Dr. Niranjan said that without a strong foundation in basic education, skilling becomes a diversion rather than a solution. He also believes that vocational training introduced too early without completing at least 10 to 11 years of schooling cannot deliver any real employability. When I spoke to the Congress spokesperson, Rajiv Gowda, he also highlighted that there's been a lack of effective guidance on how young people should transition from education to skills to then employment. And whatever skills that they're introducing or training these people with, these skills cannot be pertained to just tailoring or data entry jobs. They have to make real impact for the youth of this country who are taking education very seriously.
Smriti, finally, I would like to ask you in conclusion. Of course, the first thought that comes to my mind is this, which is that I hope that it doesn't become another political drama and theater, etc., where the blame game will start. As you just mentioned, the opposition spokesperson probably spoke about something. Now he will obviously go ahead and talk to the ruling government, etc., etc., etc. But finally, at the end of it all, Smriti, the people who are there, who need the jobs, I wish and pray that we can provide them with a solution. At least the ecosystem and the policymakers can actually be a little more empathetic towards their needs. That's my thought. And finally, I would like you to give us the front page take today, because you have followed this very closely. What's your final understanding?
No, the final understanding is that unless the opposition, the people of this country, stand up and actually speak against this, the policy is not going to reset, because, like I said, they're going to introduce more skilling development schemes, which may not help the youth of this country. What we need is to talk to people to understand what they actually need, where they're looking for jobs, what kind of job roles they need, what kind of job roles can be created for such people, because the youth is going to be the future of this country, and if we're not going to take care of them, understand their point of view and what they want from this country, we're not going to succeed in any of these schemes.
And very important point you just made, because Smruthi, we pride ourselves internationally, globally, as the country which is one of the youngest in the world. We have that as a huge form of an advantage over probably the West, probably a lot of other countries. We pride ourselves on that, and I think we need to be a far more sensitive towards that very youth, which is going to probably go ahead and ensure that we can conquer bigger aspects moving forward. Thank you so much, Smruthi, for being on front page. As always, it was fun having a conversation. Of course, really hope that something good comes out of this audit and the findings that it has given in terms of the policies that we will have in the future. Thank you so much once again. Ladies and gentlemen,
Thank you.
that was Smruthi. And of course, she will be covering this. We, of course, will be covering it as it progresses in the near future. And of course, like, share, subscribe. And as we always say, think AI, think AIM.